The Galactic Coalition Hall, an awe-inspiring structure carved from the shimmering crystal of a neutron star fragment, was in chaos. Holographic projections of destroyed worlds floated above the vast chamber, grim reminders of the Zarneth swarm's devastating march. Delegates of 100 species argued over tactics, alliances, and responsibilities, their voices a cacophony of fear and dissent. Captain Elias Vren stood at the edge of the hall, arms crossed, his angular face shadowed by the light of burning holographic planets. His uniform, worn but immaculate, bore the scars of countless battles. He listened to the bickering with growing impatience. The coalition, for all its grandeur, was paralyzed by indecision. No species wanted to risk their fleets or their people against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Finally, he stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished crystal floor. The hall grew quiet as the human strode to the center, his presence commanding attention. Vren wasn't just any soldier. His reputation preceded him, a man who had turned impossible battles into victories. Yet even his name carried controversy. Some saw him as reckless, others as the very embodiment of humanity's stubborn resolve. "I've heard enough," Vren said, his deep voice cutting through the silence. His eyes swept over the assembly, his gaze steady, unflinching. "While you sit here debating who should act, the Zarneth are acting. Another world falls with every passing moment. Entire civilizations wiped out, and you're all too afraid to face them." A murmur rippled through the chamber, but no one dared interrupt. Vren took a step closer to the central podium, his hands gripping its edge. "You want to protect your people. Fine. Let humanity take the lead. We've fought impossible wars before, and we'll do it again, but we won't wait for your approval." The room erupted in protests. Representatives of various species hurled accusations, arrogance, recklessness, a human power grab. Vren let them vent, his expression a mask of defiance. Finally, he raised a hand, silencing the room once more. "We don't have time for your fears," he said. "I'm proposing a Vanguard, an elite human strike force that will take the fight directly to the swarm. Surgical strikes to dismantle their infrastructure, weaken their hive mind. While you protect your borders, we'll be out there, doing what needs to be done." The coalition leaders exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a towering reptilian diplomat from the Zepharn species, hissed, "And if you fail, Captain Vren?" "What then?" Vren's jaw tightened, and he straightened to his full height. "Then we fail alone, but at least humanity will have tried." A long silence followed. Then, slowly, the coalition president, a serene, insectoid figure with translucent wings, rose. "You have your Vanguard, Captain Vren. But understand this, if you falter, humanity will bear the blame." Vren nodded sharply. "Understood." As the chamber emptied, he turned to his lieutenant, a sharp-eyed woman named Calla Wren. "Assemble the best. We leave within a week. The galaxy won't wait." The training grounds on Titan Base were a brutal testament to humanity's resolve. Its endless expanse of jagged terrain and simulated combat zones echoed with the sounds of drills, sparring, and the crackle of energy weapons. Captain Elias Vren stood on an observation platform overlooking the chaos below, arms crossed, as the first recruits for the Vanguard began their trials. "This is the best humanity has to offer," muttered Jax Rallon, a tall, scruffy ex-mercenary leaning casually against a rail. His mismatched combat gear made him look more like a scavenger than an elite soldier. Half of them look like they've never seen a real fight. "You're here too, Rallon," snapped Calla Wren, standing rigid beside Vren. Her pristine uniform and sharp demeanor screamed discipline, and her piercing gaze was fixed on the recruits below. "Remind me, how many times have you been court-martialed?" Rallon smirked, brushing a hand through his unkempt hair. "Twice officially, the rest were misunderstandings." Calla rolled her eyes, returning her attention to the training field. The recruits were a mix of Earth's finest, hardened veterans, cybernetic enhancements glinting under the harsh lights. engineers capable of hacking alien tech mid-combat, and even a few wild cards, like the young sharpshooter nicknamed Spark, who was already dismantling a simulated enemy drone with alarming precision. But their teamwork was non-existent. Within minutes of the first simulation, arguments broke out. One recruit, a towering brute named Cole Draxus, shoved another soldier after a miscommunication during a firefight. The simulation ended in disaster, with a simulated detonation taking out most of the squad. Vren's voice was calm but firm as he turned to Kala. "Thoughts?" "Undisciplined," she said immediately. "Too many egos. They'll collapse in the field." Rallan snorted. "They've got fight, though. Better that than a bunch of robots waiting for orders." Vren silenced them both with a raised hand. "We don't have time to forge perfection. They need to learn the hard way." He glanced at a nearby comms officer. "Run them again." Down on the field, Cole wiped sweat from his brow as the simulation reset. The recruits grumbled as they took their positions, tension thick in the air. Spark gave Call a sidelong glance. "Maybe try not throwing me into a kill zone this time, big guy." "Maybe don't stand in the way," Cole growled. "No," barked Lieutenant Wren, her amplified voice cutting through the chaos as she descended to the field. "You're not soldiers right now, you're liabilities. Every argument, every mistake, every second of hesitation costs lives. The swarm doesn't care about your pride. Out there, they'll tear you apart." The recruits fell silent, chastened, as the next simulation began. This time, they worked with reluctant cohesion. It wasn't smooth, but by the end of the drill, they had completed the objective. From the observation deck, Vren allowed himself a faint smile. "They'll learn," he said softly, "because they don't have a choice." The Vanguard's first mission was supposed to be straightforward: infiltrate and destroy a Zarnith resource hub hidden in the asteroid belt of the Alteri system. The facility was a critical supply point, feeding the swarm's relentless advance. The mission had been meticulously planned, stealth was paramount. But as Captain Elias Vren watched the asteroid's shadowed surface grow larger through the cockpit window of their stealth corvette, Iron Resolved, he couldn't shake the feeling that the swarm knew they were coming. "Entering target zone in 5, announced Ensign Mira J., the ship's young but capable pilot. Her fingers danced over the controls, navigating the ship with precision through the belt's shifting debris field. "Anything on the scanners?" Vren asked, leaning over the tactical display. Kala Ren, now in full combat gear, studied the holographic readout. "Nothing yet. Either they're as blind as we hoped, or they're waiting." "They're waiting," Rallan said from his seat, casually spinning a combat knife between his fingers. His smirk was gone, replaced with the grim focus of a man who had survived countless ambushes. "The swarm doesn't leave key assets unguarded." Vren nodded, his jaw tightening. "We stick to the plan. Kala, take Team 1 to plant the charges on the processing units. Rallan, you're with me on Team 2. We'll secure the command node. Everyone, stay sharp." The Vanguard disembarked in silence, their black armor blending seamlessly with the asteroid's surface. The facility loomed ahead, its spindly structures embedded into the rock like a mechanical parasite. Automated turrets scanned the area, their red lenses glowing faintly in the dim starlight. Kala led her team toward the lower levels, bypassing sentry drones with the help of Spark, who hacked into the facility's security grid. "Turrets are on a loop," Spark whispered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You've got a 30-second window. Go." They moved swiftly, planting charges on the massive processing units that funneled raw materials into the swarm's war machine. The tension was palpable, but Kala's commanding presence kept the team focused. When a drone patrol passed too close, she neutralized it with surgical precision, her blade slicing silently through its optic sensors. Meanwhile, Vren's team breached the command node, a central hub glowing with alien bioluminescence. The air was thick with a strange hum, like a living heartbeat. Rowland took point, his plasma rifle sweeping the room. No resistance, he muttered. That's never good. As they planted the final charge, a deafening shriek tore through the air. The walls themselves seemed to come alive as Zarnith drones emerged from hidden alcoves, their chitinous forms gleaming. Ambush! Vren roared, firing his rifle as the drones swarmed. Rowland covered him, his sharp aim dropping targets with ruthless efficiency. Team 1 status, we're pinned. Kala's voice crackled over the comm. Charges are set, but we need extraction. Hold your position, Vren ordered. We're coming to you. The Vanguard fought their way back to the extraction point, their unity tested under fire. By the time the Iron Resolve lifted off, the facility was a fiery wreck. The mission was a success, but as the team caught their breath, the reality of the swarm's ferocity sank in. This was the easy one, Vren said grimly, staring at the burning asteroid. It only gets harder from here. The Iron Resolve cruised through the endless void, its hull battered from the Vanguard's last mission, but holding strong. In the quiet of the ship's dimly lit war room, Captain Elias Vren stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, his eyes fixed on their next target. Kala Ren and Jax Rowland sat nearby, the tension between them unspoken but palpable. This isn't just a resource war, Vren said, breaking the silence. The Zarnith aren't mindless. They're organized, deliberate. We need to figure out why. We've been over this, Kala replied, her tone clipped. They're an apex predator. Expand, consume, repeat. It's what they do. Not like this, Vren countered, tapping the hologram to highlight a derelict ship adrift in the Thalric system. This vessel was found 2 jumps from our last target. Coalition intelligence marked it as Zarnith infected, but the scans show something unusual. Biosignatures of a species that's been extinct for millennia. Rowland leaned back, crossing his arms. So what? We poke around an ancient ghost ship and hope it gives us answers. Sounds like a great way to get ambushed again. Vren ignored the sarcasm, his gaze steady. That ship holds the key to understanding the swarm. We're going. The Thalric system was a graveyard of twisted metal and drifting debris, remnants of battles fought long before humanity's time among the stars. The derelict ship loomed ahead, its hull blackened and warped. As the Iron Resolve approached, the eerie hum of the Zarnith's biotech pulsed faintly over the comms, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the bones. Scanners are picking up minimal activity, Spark reported from the bridge, her voice tight with unease. No active drones, but there's something. Movement inside the ship. Cold be residual biomatter, Kala suggested, though her grip on her rifle told a different story. Or a trap, Rowland muttered. Stay sharp, Vren ordered as they docked with the derelict. The boarding team stepped into the ship's hollowed-out corridors, their lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air was thick with a strange, acrid smell, and the walls pulsated faintly as though the ship itself was alive. Deep within the vessel, they found a chamber that defied explanation. Massive tendrils of biomechanical growth wrapped around alien consoles, their purpose incomprehensible. At the center of the room lay a stasis pod, its surface etched with symbols none of them recognized. Is that a body? Spark whispered, pointing to the humanoid figure suspended within the pod. Its features were distorted, a hybrid of flesh and the swarm's alien biotech. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently, and the pulsating walls began to writhe. A voice echoed through the comms, distorted but unmistakably alien. Intruders will be consumed. Fall back. Vren barked, firing at the walls as they began to split open, releasing swarms of drones. The team fought their way back through the twisting corridors, but the ship seemed to shift around them, trapping them within. This thing's alive. Rowland shouted, covering Spark as she hacked a sealed door. Move it, kid! The door hissed open, and the team scrambled into the Iron Resolve. As they broke away from the derelict, the ship erupted into a mass of writhing biomechanical tendrils, lashing out toward them before collapsing in on itself. Back aboard the Iron Resolve, the Vanguard pieced together what they'd seen. The symbols on the stasis pod were traced back to an extinct race, one whose experiments may have birthed the swarm. The discovery left them shaken. The swarm wasn't just a threat, it was someone's creation. "This changes everything," Vren said grimly. "We're not just fighting an enemy. We're fighting someone's mistake. And if they made it once, who's to say they won't make it again?" The Iron Resolve hovered in the shadow of a dying star, its hull cloaked in darkness. The Vanguard had returned from the derelict ship bruised but alive, their minds weighed down by the discovery of the stasis pod. As the crew gathered in the war room, Captain Vren laid out their next course of action. The symbols on the stasis pod belonged to the Alteth, an extinct race wiped out eons ago. Vren began, the hologram of the alien runes spinning slowly above the table. The Coalition archives suggest they were masters of bioengineering. If they created the swarm, we need to know why and how to stop it. Calla Wren frowned, her arms crossed. "If they're extinct, where do we even begin?" Vren gestured to a star chart. "Not all of them are. Coalition Black Ops files mention an Alteth enclave hidden in the Neburis Rift, a region no one dares enter. Rumor has it they survived their fall by severing themselves from the galaxy." Jax Rowland raised an eyebrow. "So we're chasing ghost stories now? Sounds like a bad idea." "It's our only lead," Vren replied firmly. "If there are Alteth survivors, they might know the swarm's weaknesses. Without that knowledge, we're fighting blind." The Neburis Rift was as foreboding as the stories claimed. A swirling mass of gravitational anomalies and ion storms, it seemed to repel any attempt at navigation. Mira Jade piloted the Iron Resolve with gritted teeth, her every move calculated to keep the ship from being torn apart. "We're getting close to the coordinates," she announced, sweat beading on her forehead. "But there's something out there, a structure, maybe." The Vanguard stared at the view screen as a massive crystalline fortress emerged from the storm. It was like nothing they had ever seen, its translucent spires pulsing with faint light. "Looks like someone's home," Rowland muttered, checking his weapon. The ship's comms crackled to life, a deep, melodic voice speaking in a language they didn't recognize. Spark quickly activated the translator. "They're saying we're intruders, that we've brought death to their sanctuary. They think we're infected," Spark realized, panic in her voice. "By the swarm." "Patch me through," Vren ordered. When the channel opened, his voice was calm but commanding. "This is Captain Alias Vren of the Human Vanguard. We're not infected, but the swarm is destroying everything. If you're the Alteth, we need your help." There was silence. Then the crystalline structure shifted, opening a gateway into its depths. The melodic voice returned, softer this time. "Enter, but know this, the sins of the past cannot be undone." Inside, the Vanguard found themselves in a sprawling chamber that glowed with an ethereal light. The Alteth were there, tall, elegant beings with semi-translucent skin that shimmered with energy. Their leader, an imposing figure with glowing eyes, stepped forward. "We know why you have come," the Alteth leader said, their voice resonating in the air. "But to fight the swarm, you must first understand its truth. It is not just our creation, it is our punishment." The Vanguard exchanged uneasy glances as the Alteth revealed the chilling origins of the swarm. What began as a tool to preserve their dying civilization had become a nightmare that consumed them and now threatened the galaxy. The Alteth leader's eyes glowed faintly as they motioned for the Vanguard to follow. Their crystal palace hummed with an unsettling energy, the walls alive with ancient symbols and strange designs. It was clear that the Alteth had once been a powerful and highly advanced race, but now their civilization had withered to a handful of survivors hidden in the heart of the Neburis Rift. "Come," the leader beckoned. "The truth you seek lies beyond this chamber." They led the team through twisting corridors, their steps echoing against the smooth crystalline floors. Finally, they arrived at a vast hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center of the room stood a massive floating crystal. It pulsed with a dark energy, an ominous, magnetic hum radiating from it. The Alteth leader stopped before the crystal and turned to the Vanguard. "This is the source," the leader said softly. "It was once a marvel of our technology. We used it to manipulate biological matter, to heal, to preserve life. But it came with a terrible price." Rallin raised an eyebrow. "A tech that preserves life sounds like something we'd want to get our hands on. So what went wrong?" "The swarm," the Alteth leader replied. "It was born from this very source. We were on the verge of saving our dying world, using the source to engineer a new form of life, beings that could adapt to any environment. The Zarnith were to be our perfect solution. They were supposed to be our saviors." The Vanguard fell silent, absorbing the enormity of the statement. "You created them?" Kala asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," the leader replied, their voice distant. "But the Zarnith were never meant to be as they are now. They were supposed to be caretakers, guardians of our dying species. Instead, something went wrong, something changed. The Source's influence corrupted them, twisted them into something beyond our control. They became a plague, devouring everything in their path, including us. The Alteth are no more, and now the swarm turns its hunger outward." Vren clenched his fists, his gaze hardening. "And you expect us to stop them with no more than this story?" The Alteth leader stepped forward, their gaze piercing. "You must understand. The swarm is not merely a threat of biology or military might. It is the result of unchecked ambition, the price of tampering with forces beyond comprehension. The only way to defeat them is to sever the source. Destroy it, and the swarm will collapse. Their hive mind, their drive, their very essence will disintegrate. But beware, severing the source comes with its own cost." Rallin scoffed. "There's always a cost. What's the catch?" The Alteth leader's voice dropped to a whisper. "To sever the source is to risk creating something worse. We were the first to use it, and we paid the price. If you destroy it, you might stop the swarm, but the energy contained within the source will need a new vessel, a new host, and once it chooses, there will be no escaping it." A heavy silence fell over the room. Vren's mind raced as he considered the implications of what the Alteth were saying. A solution lay before them, but it was wrapped in a dark, dangerous enigma. "Where do we go from here?" Vren finally asked, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "The source must be destroyed," the Alteth leader replied. "But only one with the strength to carry its burden can succeed. It will take everything you have." The Vanguard stood at the edge of the crystal chamber, the weight of the Alteth leader's words pressing heavily on them. The decision they now faced was like staving on the precipice of a cliff, staring into an abyss where either choice could lead to destruction. The source was the key to stopping the swarm, but its cost was more than anyone could truly fathom. "We have to destroy it," Captain Vren said, his voice firm. His mind was made up. He could feel the ticking clock of the galaxy's survival pressing against his chest. "The swarm won't wait for us to figure out the consequences. It has to end now." Kala Ren looked at him, the uncertainty in her eyes barely masked by her resolve. "And if the source decides it wants you, Elias, you're ready to become, whatever it is, something worse?" Vren met her gaze, unflinching. "I won't let the swarm consume us all. Someone has to make the sacrifice." Rallin, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. His voice was low but deliberate. "You really think the rest of us are just going to let you do this alone? That's not how we work. We've got your back. Whatever happens next, we do it together." The Alteth leader stepped forward, their voice grave. "Your sacrifice may not be enough. The source has claimed many before you. Their fates were lost to time, but I can tell you this: once it chooses, it will not let you go." We don't have time for your warnings, Rallan snapped, the tension in his voice clear. Every minute we waste, the swarm grows stronger. Are we really just going to stand around here talking while the galaxy burns? The Alteth leader fell silent, their glowing eyes softening in the dim light. Then go, and may the stars guide you. The journey to the Source's core was a perilous one. As the Vanguard descended into the lower levels of the Alteth sanctuary, the wall seemed to pulse with an eerie, foreboding energy. The air was thick with the same hum they had felt earlier, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to seep into their bones. The deeper they went, the more the very environment seemed to react to their presence, crystals thrumming, ancient machinery wearing to life. Finally, they reached the heart of the chamber. The Source lay before them, suspended in a vast, open space, its form towering over them. The air around it shimmered with a strange heat, distorting the space in a way that made the entire room feel unreal. Its energy was palpable, as if the very fabric of reality was warping under its influence. "Here we are," Vren muttered, his voice thick with tension. Calla stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped her weapon. "We do this now. No turning back." With a decisive motion, Vren activated the detonator. A pulse of energy shot through the room, and the Source began to crack, the walls of light and shadow bending in response. The hum grew louder, reverberating through the air, almost like a scream of protest. Suddenly, the energy field surrounding the Source flared, a blinding flash filling the chamber. The ground shook violently, and the Vanguard staggered, trying to maintain their footing. The crystal walls around them cracked, and something dark, something ancient, stirred deep within the Source. "This isn't right," Spark shouted, scrambling to her feet as the walls began to close in. "It's resisting." Before she could finish, a massive pulse of energy erupted from the Source, sending the Vanguard sprawling. Vren was knocked to the ground, the pain searing through his body as the light from the Source blinded him. Through the chaos, a voice, a strange, ancient voice, echoed through Vren's mind. "You seek to destroy me, but I am not the true enemy." Vren gasped, barely able to breathe as the ground quaked beneath him. "Who are you?" The voice responded, its tone both sorrowful and ominous. "I am the one who was betrayed. I am the darkness you were never meant to awaken." The walls of the chamber began to collapse, the ancient power of the Source fighting against the Vanguard's efforts. The clock was ticking. This battle was far from over. The chamber around them was disintegrating, the walls crumbling under the immense pressure of the energy unleashed from the Source. Vren struggled to his feet, his body battered from the blast, his mind reeling from the strange voice that had invaded his thoughts. The light from the Source blazed brighter, now more than just a beacon of power. It was a storm, a swirling vortex of dark energy that pulled at everything in its vicinity. "We need to finish this," Calla shouted, her voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. She was at Vren's side, her face grim, but her determination unwavering. "Whatever that thing is, it's not the swarm, but it's connected to it." Vren's vision blurred, his thoughts momentarily fragmented by the overwhelming force of the Source. "I am the one who was betrayed," the voice echoed again, louder this time, its sorrow twisted with a terrifying promise. "And you, the ones who seek to destroy me, will become my new vessel, a vessel of the swarm." "No," Vren shouted, fighting to stay conscious. "We won't let you turn us into your monster." The air shimmered with the pulse of the Source as it fought to survive, and suddenly, the chamber fell silent. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. Vren's heart raced, his breath shallow, but he knew they were running out of time. The Source's power was bleeding into the room, bending the fabric of reality, but he had to act. "We can't destroy it directly, can we?" Spark asked, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. She was scanning the chamber's fluctuating energy readings. "It's too powerful. We'll get caught in the backlash." Rallan, who had been observing the room's shifting dynamics, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed as he understood the nature of the source. It's not about destroying it physically. It's about severing the connection between the source and the swarm, the energy that binds them together. Vren nodded, the idea solidifying in his mind. The Alteth had warned them, to sever the source, they would need to unravel its connection to the swarm. And the key was in the crystal's heart, in its core, the entity that had been trapped within it for millennia. The only way to sever the source's grip on the galaxy was to sever the link it had formed with the swarm, to destroy the sentient force that had used the source to control them. Vren turned to the rest of his team, his resolve firm. "We need to overload the core," he said, his voice filled with purpose. "That will break the source's connection and disintegrate its influence over the swarm." Kala's eyes widened. "But how do we?" "No time for questions," Vren interrupted, already heading toward the central chamber's control panel. The source was pulsing more erratically now, its violent energy pressing against him. He could feel it, creeping into his mind, whispering to him, but he fought against it. "We overload it with our own power," Spark said, understanding the plan now. "We channel everything we've got into it, force it to collapse under its own energy." Rallan stepped up, drawing his blade. "Let's do this." The Vanguard worked quickly, each of them focused on their specific tasks, disconnecting power lines, realigning energy conduits, and setting up the detonation sequence. The chamber around them shook violently, the energy building toward a climax. The source was fighting back, but they were too close to turn back now. As the countdown reached 0, the core of the source began to hum, a massive pulse of energy surging through the room. Vren felt it. The voice, the presence, trying to claw its way into his mind one last time, but he held firm. They were almost there. "You will regret this," the voice whispered, a final warning before it was drowned out by the roaring surge of light and energy. The source exploded in a blinding wave, and for a moment, the universe itself seemed to shudder. Time seemed to stretch, and then everything went dark. When Vren awoke, the chamber was silent. The source was gone, reduced to nothing more than a fading pulse of light. The walls of the crystal sanctuary were cracked but intact, and the team stood together, shaken but alive. The swarm's connection to the galaxy had been severed. "We did it," Kala whispered, her voice hoarse, disbelief still lingering in her words. Vren nodded, but the weight of the victory was heavy. They had saved the galaxy, but the cost had been high. The swarm was no more, but the dark forces they had encountered would always haunt them. The battle was over, but the war against the unknown, the consequences of their actions, had just begun. "Let's go home," Vren said, his voice resolute, though the future was uncertain. The Vanguard had won, but the galaxy was still a vast, dangerous place.